You spent $300 on a cutting-edge synthetic jacket, yet you're freezing in 40-degree weather. Meanwhile, a medieval peasant wearing simple wool stayed comfortable through winters that dropped to minus 40 degrees Fahrenheit. What's happening here? The problem isn't your expensive outer layer. It's what you're wearing underneath it. That cotton t-shirt is destroying your entire thermal system from the inside out. Modern comfort has weakened our body's ability to generate natural heat, and we've completely forgotten the three-layer system that kept people alive in brutal conditions. Today, we're exploring the science of why medieval clothing worked and why yours doesn't. The cotton problem. Your base layer is sabotaging you. Let's start with the biggest thread in your closet. Cotton is a hydrophilic fiber, which means it attracts and absorbs water. When you sweat or encounter light rain, cotton soaks up that moisture and holds onto it. But here's where it becomes dangerous. Wet cotton collapses. Those tiny air pockets that provide insulation when the fabric is dry. They vanish under the weight of water. The cotton fibers flatten and press directly against your skin. Now your base layer isn't insulating you anymore. It's actively pulling heat away from your body. This is why outdoor survival experts say cotton kills. It's not an overstatement. Wet cotton can drain heat from your core for hours, causing hypothermia even on days that seem relatively mild. Your expensive jacket becomes worthless when your base layer is working against you. But the problem extends beyond just fabric selection. We've lost our cold tolerance. Modern humans exist in what scientists call thermoneutral zones. We transition from heated homes to climate-controlled vehicles to heated workplaces. Our bodies rarely experience genuine cold stress. This constant comfort has real consequences. Our natural defenses against cold have weakened. Medieval people had faster, more robust shivering responses. Their bodies were quicker to redirect blood flow away from extremities to protect vital organs. They were physiologically tougher because their environment demanded it. Think about it. A medieval person lived with the seasons. They spent hours outdoors every day. Their homes were drafty, heated only by a single central fire. Their bodies were constantly adapting to temperature fluctuations. They were naturally cold. We've exchanged that resilience for convenience. Central heating allows us to make fatal clothing choices without immediate consequences. We can wear cotton jeans and thin hoodies in winter because we're never more than a few steps from artificial warmth. There's also a psychological element. We select clothes based on fashion and social status, not survival functionality. This is a luxury purchased by cheap fossil fuels. When heating a poorly insulated house costs just a few dollars monthly, thermal efficiency doesn't matter. Medieval people couldn't afford this luxury. While their clothing was also a status symbol, the primary concern in winter was survival. Making a fashionable but non-functional choice wasn't a style statement. It was potentially lethal. The evidence. From ice we don't have to speculate about medieval clothing systems. The ice is revealing its secrets. Norway's Secrets of the Ice project has been recovering artifacts from melting glaciers for over a decade. These aren't museum replicas or artistic interpretations. They're actual garments worn by real people who survived in conditions that would kill most of us today. In 2019, researchers recovered a complete woven Viking mitten from a mountain pass. It had been preserved in ice for over 1,000 years. The construction is extraordinary dense wool yarn, tightly woven with a complex pattern that creates multiple layers of trapped air. This wasn't casual clothing. This was survival technology. They've also found complete Iron Age tunics. The weave patterns demonstrate sophisticated understanding of thermal physics. Multiple yarn weights in a single garment. Tight weaves at stress points for durability, and looser weaves in body areas to maximize air trapping. Every design choice served a thermal purpose. The three-layer system that actually works. Archaeological discoveries from medieval Russian sites reveal the three-layer approach in detail. Layer 1 was the linen chemise worn directly against the skin. This wasn't about insulation. This was about hygiene and moisture management. Medieval people understood something crucial. Their valuable wool layers were expensive and difficult to wash. The linen chemise served as a washable barrier, protecting the wool from body oils and sweat. But linen had another critical property. Unlike cotton, linen fibers have natural capillary action. When you sweat, linen pulls that moisture away from your skin without structural collapse. The fibers don't flatten like cotton does when wet. They maintain their structure and continue moving moisture outward. This is why linen was the foundation of the system. It kept the skin drier and the insulation layer cleaner. Medieval people could wear the same wool tunic for weeks or months, because the linen underneath was doing the work and getting washed regularly. Layer 2 was the wool tunic, the insulating core of the entire system. This layer had one job: trap body heat. The genius was in the modular approach. Need more warmth? Add another wool layer. Medieval Russians would wear multiple layers, one over the other. The most sophisticated version was the gambeson, a quilted jacket stuffed with wool or linen. The quilted construction created dozens of individual air-trapping chambers. These chambers prevented the insulation from shifting or settling. Each quilted section maintained its thickness independently. But here's what made wool the perfect insulation material. Each wool fiber has a three-dimensional crimp structure. Under a microscope, wool looks like tiny coiled springs. These springs create millions of stable air pockets within the fabric. Air is the actual insulator, not the fiber itself. When wool gets wet, those crimped fibers don't collapse like cotton. They maintain their springy structure and continue trapping air. This is the famous wool insulates when wet, property that has saved countless lives. Layer 3 was the weather shield. Dense wool cloaks with natural lanolin coating, fur-lined capes for the wealthy, or leather outer garments for wind protection. This layer's job was simple: block wind and shed precipitation before it could reach the insulation layer. Medieval hoods were particularly sophisticated. They weren't just hats, they were integrated thermal systems that covered the head, neck, and shoulders, sealing the thermal chimney at the neck where rising body heat would otherwise escape. The physics that makes it work. To understand why medieval clothing worked so well, we need to examine the physics of the materials themselves. Let's start with wool's secret weapon. This is the waxy substance that sheep naturally produce. Medieval people used wool that was unprocessed or minimally processed, meaning the lanolin was still coating the fibers. They were essentially wearing nature's version of Gore-Tex technology. Water would beat up and roll off their cloaks instead of soaking through. But lanolin does something even more sophisticated. While the surface of the wool fiber repels liquid water, the core of the fiber can absorb water vapor up to 30% of its weight. This creates a water-repellent surface with a moisture-absorbing core. The wool pulls moisture vapor away from your skin without feeling wet or clammy. This dual-action moisture management is impossible to replicate with synthetic materials. Modern waterproof coatings wear off after repeated washing. Lanolin is part of the fiber structure itself. It's permanent, renewable, and completely natural. When cotton gets wet, its straight fibers absorb water and collapse under the weight. The fabric becomes dense and loses all its insulating air pockets. When wool gets wet, those crimped fibers maintain their spring structure. They continue trapping, insulating air, even when thoroughly soaked. This is why wool's insulates when wet property isn't just marketing its physics. The crimp doesn't disappear when wet and springs back when dried. This resilience meant medieval people could work in snow, get caught in rain, or sweat heavily without losing their thermal protection. Why? We abandoned this knowledge. If these medieval systems were so effective, why did we abandon them? The answer lies in three converging forces that prioritized speed and profit over thermal performance. The Industrial Revolution changed everything. Suddenly, manufacturing speed became more important than product quality. Factory-produced clothing could be made in hours, using unskilled labor. Cotton became dominant not because it was superior, but because it was profitable. Cotton plantations made this inferior fiber cheaper than quality wool processing. The market chose economics over physics. Then came cheap fossil fuels. When you could heat a poorly built house for just a few dollars a month, thermal efficiency became irrelevant. Why invest in expensive wool clothing when you could just turn up the thermostat? Trade schools abandoned traditional knowledge. As industrial methods replaced artisan skills, the accumulated wisdom of generations simply died out. Schools stopped teaching fiber properties and traditional construction techniques. The knowledge that kept people alive for thousands of years was discarded as obsolete. Marketing campaigns convinced consumers that synthetic materials surpassed natural alternatives in every way. Natural materials were portrayed as primitive and uncomfortable. This knowledge didn't disappear everywhere. In rural Alaska, parts of Scandinavia, and remote regions of Russia, people still live using these traditional methods. They burn a fraction of the fuel their neighbors consume. They stay comfortable when power goes out. What you can do today. The medieval system wasn't primitive. It was sophisticated engineering that worked with physics, not against it. Look for 100% wool-based layers and avoid cotton completely in cold conditions. Build your thermal system using natural fibers that work with your body's heat generation, not against it. The linen base layer manages moisture and hygiene. The wool middle layer provides thermal mass and insulation. The outer shell blocks weather. Each layer enhances the other's performance. Remove any one layer and the system's effectiveness drops dramatically. This wasn't just clothing. It was wearable architecture designed by people who understood that thermal failure meant death. The knowledge still exists. We just have to choose to use it. Subscribe for our follow-up video covering modern brands, applying these traditional principles and how you can build your own three-layer system that actually works.